Welcoming our three authors, please. I think we have Rick.
Let's welcome our authors.
Welcome everybody. And this is Mr. Rick Polad. Did I say your name right?
Very good.
And Joanne Vinty.
You guys can take a seat.
We can all stare at you. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming this afternoon. My name is Dee Brennan. I am the Executive Director of RAILS, which is the Reaching Across Illinois Library System. And we provide services to libraries over vast stretches of Illinois. We do consulting services and interlibrary loan. And we also are very happy to be a venue for any kind of party that you might like to have, balloons and food and et cetera. So, but no, seriously, we were very happy to be involved in this project, and the soon-to-be famous Illinois Author Project. It was is the brainchild of the RAILS marketing group, which is a hybrid, kind of a spin-off of the former North Suburban Library System, Metropolitan Library System. I have to stand so that I can be seen on the TV, sorry. So a group of a few members, I think maybe 8 or so members of this marketing group attended a program at the ALA annual conference last summer in Chicago, given by David Vinjamuri, who is here with us today, about e-books and e-publishing and branding and libraries. And these particular go-getters were very inspired by his program, which really, he challenged libraries and librarians to work together to show the power of libraries and to publishers and authors, and to kind of wield their collective influence, or I should say our collective influence, to bring an obscure or somewhat obscure author to prominence. So, as I say, they were very inspired by this idea, and they came to me. And I was immediately smitten with the idea. I have to say, I could immediately see that this was something that, I have myself been frustrated by the fact that libraries do so much to build readership, and in libraries for authors, et cetera, and that the publishers have not lately seemed to realize the power that we wield, and make them lots of money in addition. So it seemed to me that this was a great opportunity, a great venture for RAILS to be involved in. And so this group of marketers, we gave them, along with the Illinois Library Association, Bob Doyle, we gave them some very modest financial support, but lots of moral support. And they have really created this project on a shoestring budget, which of course is what library marketers do all the time, as we know, in libraries, helping to tell the library story. So 3 cheers for you guys, for all you library marketers out there. So at this point, I think I'm going to introduce one of our co-sponsors, Bob Doyle. He's going to say a few words, and you're going to hear some more about the project from the geniuses themselves. And
you can stay right here.
Stay right
Yes.
here. Okay.
I was informed that I can make some comments maybe an hour or 2 ago, and my natural reaction was like, why am I talking? I want to find out who the winner is, So let's not delay this. But I will say one thing that I thought of when I was talking to David. We, the Illinois Library Association, RAILS, American Library Association, many entities sponsor many continuing education events all the time. People attend them, they look with, very enthusiastic about it, and I always kind of wonder, what happens? Do they go back to their libraries and implement some of this stuff, or is it like, well, that was entertaining, where are we going for lunch? I want a margarita, what do you want? Is that what's kind of going on here?
Yep.
Oh, it is. All right, confirmation. And so the question is, where are the margaritas? No. So.
Be patient.
Yeah. So I think this is a tremendous example of some people with great initiative, and you're going to be introduced to all of them. They'll tell the story, so I don't need to tell it, about how they were really inspired by what David did in an extremely short amount of time. They were able to coalesce, come up with an idea that I think David and others would say they should be doing it in every state in the nation. Okay, we'll start in Illinois, but it should be a national program.
Right.
I hope it is, and those are my remarks, and I'm going to get out of here because I want to find out who wins.
All right.
Because I don't know.
So I think now we're going to let David talk a little bit about your take on the project. It's right to my agenda.
So I'm about the most unlikely person in the world to accidentally launch a competition that ends up with hopefully somebody becoming famous. Because I'm a marketer by training and an author too. And what happened to me is I started writing for Forbes a couple of years ago. I started teaching at NYU about 10 years ago. And as I had to explain marketing and brands to more and more people, it became clear to me that among the people that understood them the least were authors. And that the whole mysterious reason why somebody reads one book and not another was something that wasn't really as well understood as it should be. And I also realized that things were changing very quickly. So I published a book with Wiley in 2008 called Accidental Branding that was about how ordinary people without corporate marketing training built really big brands. And I mostly did it because I got to walk in the woods with the founder of Burt's Bees in Maine and hang out with Craig of Craigslist and do stuff like that. But my real passion was fiction, and I had been sort of writing it on and off since I was a kid. And I went through this very odd experience where I had a very high-profile agent who represented my business book, and I thought he was going to turn away my fiction, and he actually said, no, I'd love to do it. And then his whole agency left, and it was about a year, and nothing happened. Then I had another agent who represented the book, and he submitted it to three of the big 5 publishers. 2 said no, 1 said yes, and that guy was laid off before he could take it to committee. And then he got a divorce, and I didn't hear from him for about another 6 months. And so 2 years of my life went by, and I was sort of not publishing this book that was really more of my heart than the one that I traditionally published. And I heard about self-publishing, and I thought it was really interesting what was going on. These people are going out there and actually just doing things directly like entrepreneurs, and I had written about entrepreneurs. And I realized, much to my shock, that I had been reading self-published books for about 2 years without ever realizing it. Now I had noticed that at times there were a lot more spelling errors in the books that I was reading than I was traditionally used to. But I just put it on, paying cheaper rates to copywriters in New York and proofreaders. And once I figured things out, I actually decided to write about it in Forbes, and I decided to self-publish. And so I self-published a book called Operator 2 years ago. And I had a great experience with both. And actually, the first part led me to sell 10,000 copies of my book last year, which is about 2.5 times the number I'd sold of my traditionally published books in the 4 years before. It got me into the top 100 on Amazon for a few days last year, which was great. But it also led me to libraries, and it's been a really interesting year because 2 women approached me after this article that I wrote about self-publishing for Forbes and said, we are independent publishers. We're not self-publishers, we're independent publishers. We represent 12 books. And one of them, a young adult book about soccer, just was on the Today Show yesterday. And we called Overdrive and said, we want to donate a copy of this book to every library in America. And they said, you're not big enough for us to talk to, so sorry, you can't do that. And there's probably something wrong with that. Because right about the same time, Maureen Sullivan, the chairman of the American Library Association, was writing a letter to publishers saying, you need to give us access, not free, just access to be able to sell your ebooks, to buy your ebooks and to lend them to our patrons. And so there was this weird disconnect that was happening. And so I got interested in it, and I started interviewing people around the industry. And I thought I was going to write a little blog post of about 800 to 1,000 words, which turned out to be 2 posts of 12,000 words in total, that in total had over 300,000 people read them. And that's what got me to the American Library Association last summer, basically giving a message that the world is changing, that the next great author hopefully is not going to die before his book is published because his mother happens to run into Walker Percy, convinces him not to go to sleep one night until he reads the first page of a manuscript that he's sure will be awful, whereupon he realizes that it's actually genius and a confederacy of dunces is published posthumously. That's not the way any one of these 3 people want to be remembered. And I'm convinced that that's in fact what has been happening for years. And the fact that Sergio de la Pava just won the Penn Robert W. Bingham Award for Naked Singularity, which was self-published for 3 years before it was picked up by the University of Chicago Press, should tell us all that we have done a disservice to the writers of this country by making such an extremely inefficient system of gatekeepers. Now, when I was interviewing Tony Marks, the head of the New York Public Libraries, he said something that I probably will never forget to me. He said, libraries are the most democratic institution in New York City. And when I went into the data and I looked at the Pew research about what people think of libraries, I realized they're actually the most democratic institution in the country. People trust libraries more than they trust the military, more than they trust their local police, a lot more than they trust Congress. And really, there was a huge opportunity because the way that books were getting to libraries was not democratic at all. And what RAILS has done with the Illinois Library Association to create the soon-to-be famous Illinois Author Contest, I think is fantastic, which is they've said, we're interested in talent. We have enough people in the state who work in libraries to filter talent. And we don't need a New York agent to tell us that it's good enough. We need our local librarian, because that's who we trust. So that's what we're going to do today. Thank you. Sue Wilsey and Denise Raleigh from RAILS are going to come talk. Sorry.
Well, first off, we have to thank, firstly, our authors for being here. They're through 3 rounds, and we're coming to this. We have to recognize some folks first, but we're getting there. And to David, thank you for getting up at 4:30 this morning to come out here. And if I could talk about the conference process that Bob talked about, is this was not a 11:30 presentation. It was an 8:30 on a Sunday morning presentation. But to talk about how popular and how pertinent this what you talk about is there were people draped all over the floor. Some of us were in the, I was near the hallway. I did not get any of the free books, but but it was a fantastic message for us. And again, when we all, and some of you folks who were all there that morning, they all walked out and said, we can do this project and it needs to be done. So thank you for inspiring us.
You know, that very day, Denise and I then just basically sat down at lunch
and started to formulate how we could accomplish this. And we saw that it was a big deal, and it was very exciting. I immediately tweeted David and asked if he had any time to chat with us. He was already on his way back to New York. But from that point on, he became a friend of this project and was a huge supporter of us. He created a video that we were able to use at the ILA conference, and of course, to be here today to support this, it's terrific. You know, we had gone out to our group of marketers that are at libraries all around the state and asked who would be interested in participating. We had a lot of interest all throughout the state. I think a lot of people looked at it and saw the amount of work and basically were like, good luck. But we did find a core of 8 of us that that really, first and foremost, are home libraries, and then of course our one consultant who actually has kind of funded herself on this project, really supported us. And so, we have to give credit to the Niles Public Library, my home library, the Fox River Valley Public Library District, the Eisenhower Public Library District, Donna E. Fletcher Consulting, LaGrange Public Library, Plainfield Public Library, and then Gail Borden the public library is generous enough to give us 2 people, and a lot of other talent like the video recording and the graphics designs and things like that we've gotten.
And can we just mention the names of everyone?
Sure.
And again, we thought it was gonna be a maybe not so complicated project, but the learning curve on this was, and thank you, we contacted David very often, but I don't think Julie Stam, who handled the judges
basically for us.
And I don't think Donna Fletcher, who handled the authors, knew exactly what they were getting into. But I would have mentioned everyone's name. Julie Stam from Eisenhower, Donna Fletcher, Nikki Zimmerman from LaGrange, Anita Quinlan from Plainfield, and then Liz Clemens was another person from Gail Borden Public Library. So thank you so much to our directors who supported us in this venture.
And so we had a very short window of time, and we knew if we didn't set some deadlines that we probably would, take our time doing this type of thing. And we wanted to make sure that we had something ready to go in October for the ILA conference, and we did. We wanted to make sure that we had a deadline in mind to have this event, and during National Library Week made a whole lot of sense to us. And so in that short amount of period of time, let's tell you a little bit about what we accomplished. We got RAILS and ILA to support us and be our partnership, got them on board.
And they shared our vision as well. As Dee said, that was an ask and answered. I think Bob was the same way. Ask and answered, yes, we support this project. We coined the title of the project.
We created a logo design.
Set up a Facebook page. We're kind of doing a wrap here. Okay, go ahead.
We secured a booth and a presentation at the October ILA conference.
We created a video. Many of our stars are here.
We got local publicity, and all of this led to over 100 nominations from librarians across the state. So thank you to all the librarians that submitted nominations. And then we've already introduced the rest of the team to you, and we really could not have shown the power of librarians without librarians' help. And with that, how many judges did we wind up having?
23, and again, these were from different types of libraries too. These weren't all public libraries. We had some special library involvement. We had academic, we had school libraries. So we were very happy that this cut and brought us together. And again, one of the impetus for this project was to bring RAILS together. And we met each other. We collapsed, as Dee was talking about, we collapsed how many systems into one to form RAILS. But Heartland, ILA, PLA, ALA were huge parts of this project again. But ILA, thank you so much, Bob, a moral supporter, financial supporter. Again, it was on a shoestring, but money we couldn't do without as well. And Dee for being our early adopter and saying, go ahead, we're going to do this. And again, we want to thank our judges who were fantastic. And again, this was all a blind process. No names were ever given to these judges, but we had 23 hardworking librarian judges who we think really came up with a dynamite 15 final. We had a second round, and now 3 finalists and a dynamite. We're going to unveil a dynamite winner here in second. We want to thank writers, emerging authors. What a fantastic thing you do. Creating is one of the hardest things, and where we can play a role in sustaining your efforts and making sure our customers have dynamite things to read, we are pleased to be a part of the process.
And I would just like to say that, I've been saying this all day, that today is kind of like we were all the brides and today is our wedding day, but we know that we have a marriage ahead and that we have to fulfill the promise of making our winner famous. And, this team is already hard at work. This is being live tweeted. The winner's announcement will go all over the place. We'll get it every place that we possibly can. And we really hope to see very quickly the ultimate power of libraries. And with that being said,
again, just one more shout out to the downstate libraries. Again,
Absolutely.
we're all up here, and we're at RAILS. We're up here in Burr Ridge, but we had nominations from across the state, and so thank you, Heartland, Jeannie Hamilton. Again, for those of you who participated, thank you. And again, this was an Illinois library project, so thank you very much. And without further ado,
let's bring back our guest of honor, David. And he is going to finally reveal who our winner is.
It's funny because when these guys told me that they were going to do this, I thought at the time, wow, wouldn't it be cool there to see who won? And I said, okay, I'm definitely going to read the book, but I'm just really glad that it happened to work out, that this day was not available on my schedule until very recently, and that we were able to work it out for me to come here. So thank you very much for bringing me here. So what I wanted to do was, I'm going to read a little bit from the three authors so you know something about them and give them each a couple moments to tell their story. But I also I have not read all three books, but I've read some of all three books, and I will hopefully read all of them soon. But the first thing I want to do is to tell you that I know that for marketing and PR purposes, and because it's a contest, there has to be a winner. But from my perspective, these three people have all already won, because they've accomplished the number one thing that you have to do as a new author, which is to get your head above the waves. And the one thing that I would offer the three of you is that if you want it, I would be happy to have a phone conference with each one of you individually to talk about a marketing plan for your book. Rick Poland spent his career as a geologist. Is that right?
And now teaching.
And is teaching earth science and astronomy at college level. He spent summers volunteering with the Coast Guard on Lake Michigan and played golf, sometimes with success. He was an avid mystery reader since he learned to read, and over the course of many years developed his character. And I have to say I have a personal relationship to this because none of you know this, of course, but he has the word Spencer in here. That's the first name of his protagonist, Spencer Manning. I have a son named Spencer. Now, anybody who loves mysteries knows that there's a connection for this particular word, which goes to Robert B. Parker and Spencer for Hire. And I will tell you that I told my wife and my mother-in-law that Spencer, our Spencer is S-P-E-N-S-E-R, which is the same as Robert B. Parker's character, was after Spencer the poet, right? Which is what it was, but it's not really true. So I'm sharing that with you. So I thought that I would read a paragraph that grabbed me from Change of Address. I'd rented a puny office with an adjacent room that I could pretend was an apartment on the top floor of an old 3-story building on the south side. It was about as far from the old neighborhood as I could get and still be in the city, but it was only a couple of miles from the station. I'd eagerly hung up a little sign that said, Spencer Manning, Private Detective, and hung my diploma up on a wall. I figured it would be a fun and easy way to make a living. So far it wasn't much of anything, except maybe bad for my health. I was getting fat and lazy sleeping behind that desk every day. If this kept up much longer, I'd be like one of those old walruses that can barely get off the rocks and back into the water. So for each one of these guys, not just the winner, I see 30 or 40 people in this room. What I would hope is that you each read at least one of these books and write a review on Amazon and write a review on Goodreads, because regardless of what the libraries do for these folks, commercially they're going to live and die by the number of reviews that they have online. So please, if you like what you hear as I introduce each writer, please write reviews online. So Rick, come tell us about yourself.
Thank you. Reviews. First of all, thank my friends for coming, and thank all of you who have put the work into putting this together, David, and all of you people. Thank you so much. This is amazing, and one of the benefit of this to self-published writers, authors, for all of us is pretty obvious, I think. Writing the book is a labor of love. Marketing, not so much. So the benefit we get from this of marketing is just wonderful. And to have something wonderful like this, and you're not from Illinois, but to have something great going on in Illinois, man. So I've had just a wonderful relationship since I was a kid with libraries. Back when I was, I think, 8 or 9, I decided to take one day a week out of my summer vacation to spend at the library. And my dad would drop me off in the morning as he went to work, and he would pick me up in the afternoon when he came home. And I would spend all day just wandering through the bookshelves and looking at books and reading. And one day, one of the librarians, and I wish I remember her name, came up to me and said, "How come you're sitting here all day reading them? Why don't you take the books home and read them?" Which I did anyway. I checked out a bunch of books. And I thought for a minute, and I said, "It's because it feels so good in here." This is just a special, magical place. And we became friends, and at some point she'd come back and she'd sit with me, and she'd ask me questions about the book I was reading. And it was just wonderful, and I remember her to this day. I recently, that magical experience has kept with me for, I'm not gonna say how many years. And it still feels good to walk into a library. It's just a wonderful feeling. And I think part of that is because, and to you, our 2 librarians, Amy, who nominated me, and Diane, who I know because she's my friend Rick, you walk into a library, I've never met a librarian who was not friendly and helpful. It's just an amazing experience. I recently tweeted, and I hate that word's in my vocabulary, but there's that marketing thing. I wrote that from the outside, a library is just a building. But once you walk in the doors, the whole world is open at your fingertips. Thanks very much.
And that makes you want to read it even more. Okay. So Mary Hutchings Reed is rumored to be the daughter of a librarian. She always wanted to be a writer and remembered fondly a toy printing press with hand-set type on which she wrote her first story, a poem. As a father of 2 young children, I think of the ink. Now semi-retired from the practice of law and of counsel to Winston and Strawn, she is a novelist, playwright, and columnist, and trying to become harder to introduce. Mission accomplished. In 2012, she was named Best Lawyers Advertising Lawyer of the Year and was honored in 2004 by Lawyers for the Creative Arts for distinguished service to the arts, and in 2011 was given the Esther Rothstein Rise Up and Reach Back Award for outstanding mentoring and leadership by the Women's Bar Association of Illinois. Not a very accomplished person altogether. She's the author of several legal books, so she's technically a hybrid author, including the IEG Legal Guide to Sponsorship, the IEG Legal Guide to Cause Marketing, and the copyright primer for librarians and educators. While she may be well known as a lawyer, she is not yet famous as a novelist. And you are famous for being one of the authors with She Writes, which I have written about on Forbes, if you're curious about it. It's a hybrid press. So excellent. So I'm going to read something from Warming Up. Got it here. One of the skills that I think that's really, really important for an author in the Kindle era and the era of ebooks is to grab readers immediately. I don't know if any of you've noticed, but I have personally noticed that I was always a voracious reader. In high school, for one book report, I read War and Peace and The Brothers Karamazov. But I find now that I abandon books at a really alarming rate. And so I think the first paragraph of a book is astonishingly important, and I loved your first paragraph, so I'm going to read the first 3 paragraphs. I'm a sucker for kind eyes, and often they're a sucker for me. That's why I like to meet my marks face to face before I make my first approach. I give them a chance to see I'm just a kid. I am, and I'm basically pretty harmless. I'm not a violent person, not like my dad. I don't mean to hurt anyone. So I hang around places where I know people can afford it if I take 10 or 20 off them. Fancy restaurants and clubs aren't good. People rush by as if my mere presence on the same block as them would spoil their entire evening. Mostly I go places where the people are rich enough, but more likely to be sympathetic to those less fortunate, as they like to call us. Places like art museums, the symphony, theaters, certain city churches. Recently I've been working outside Michigan Avenue Doctors and Therapists' office. There's a fair amount of upper middle class guilt there, and that works to my advantage. Not that I intend this to be my life's work, it's just what I do right now to get by. To support Charmaine and the baby, just until we figure out what's what and what's next.
Thanks, David. You know, that's actually the first paragraph of the book is actually the last paragraph I wrote. And after having workshopped it for maybe a year or two in a workshop that I work in every week, every Wednesday night with Enid Powell. And first, I'd just like to say happy National Library Week to all of you. I am the daughter of a librarian, and I'd like to thank Larry Durso from Mount Prospect Public Library for nominating me for being here today. My mother was the director of the Mount Prospect Public Library in the 60s and 70s, and so National Library Week was always this really big deal in our family, you know, which I know that if she were with us today, she would just be thrilled. She'd be thrilled about this project, and she'd be, I know, very happy for me. I'm a writer today because she was a librarian, you know. In the 50s, my sister and I would accompany my mother to the Crystal Lake Public Library on Sundays when it was closed, and she would be doing extra work because she was the head librarian there. And she'd be counting the fines, you know, penny a day, 2 cents a day for the second week, you know. And we would have the run of the children's room, which just, it struck me like my mother must have been the most important person in the world. She had all these books, and you know, it was probably at that time half the size of this room was the entire children's room. And I had the ambition that I could probably read every book that was there, you know. And maybe then it was possible. Today, when 1 million books are published a year, it's totally impossible. I mean, I think, you know, technology has made self-publishing egalitarian and democratic and available to all of us writers who want to become authors through publishing. But it's almost impossible, you know, to find your readers in many ways. How does a writer break through, you know? How does a reader decide what to read? And traditionally, I think readers have relied on librarians. They're the ones they trust as the curators of our culture to, you know, not only archive and organize, but also to recommend and to select, you know. I have to say that today, being among these nominees for the soon-to-be famous author project, I think is a terrific honor, and I thank you all very, very much. There's no higher compliment, I think, to a writer than to have a librarian say, I recommend this book, it's a good read. Thank you very much.
Born and raised on Chicago's South Side, Joanne vividly remembers the glow of industry that lit the night sky with an orange haze, perfumed the air with acrid odors of coke ovens and blast furnaces, although the steel mills have been shuttered for decades. First success as a writer came in 5th grade when she completed a 70-page novel, an homage to Walter Farley's Black Stallion series, and had her first play, a Thanksgiving melodrama, produced on stage at her elementary school. She's been writing ever since. Her other passion is working as a library media specialist, combining her favorite pastimes, reading, encouraging others to read, teaching information literacy, and playing with technology. She lives in Wheaton with her very supportive husband, 2 amazing daughters, and 2 naughty cats. As a writer participating in this contest, it's been a validating experience. Now, one of the things that I think about literary fiction is that it's evolving a little bit, and again, because of the medium, you know, that Marshall McLuhan used to say the message is the medium, nobody knew what the hell he was talking about. But it is definitely true that how you read something affects what you take away from it. And I'm really drawn to spare prose now that fills the emptiness with silence. And I'm just going to read one brief paragraph, but I think you'll hear what I'm talking about here. Mom wasn't a beachgoer. I'm not sure she even owned a swimsuit, ever. She never voiced any particular objections to the beach. It just seemed that there was always something else to do. Laundry, dusting, ironing, gardening, running errands, and doing yard work for her mother-in-law. She was always in motion, like a hummingbird, but without the jewel-toned plumage. The exposed leisure of the beach did not suit her. Joanne.
I thought I'd be too nervous to wing it, so I did. I want to thank RAILS for this opportunity. It's been amazing. Christopher Lash, the American historian, wrote that the family is the haven in a heartless world, but I think that quote applies to libraries as well. Growing up on the south side of Chicago, I spent hours at the branch of my public library. I'd wander down the aisles, running my fingers over the spines of books, and I'd close my eyes, I'd stop, and I'd pick one off the shelf. And then I would just randomly crack it open, and I'd slip away to a new world. I found many a wonderful read with that serendipity, but at other times I really needed guidance. There were times when I was looking for something that would transport me through time and space, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know the title or the author or even the subject matter. I just knew I wanted a book to take me somewhere, and I needed a librarian to help me find that book. Michael Gorman wrote very eloquently about the missions of libraries in his book, Enduring Values. He noted that libraries are, quote, the focal point of a community, the place remembered fondly by children when grown, the solace of the lonely and the lost, the place in which all are welcome, and a source of power through knowledge. I would add that libraries are about possibilities and about changing lives. So, I mean, let's face it, publishers think in dollar signs. They do. But librarians think differently. We think about the laws that Ranganathan came up with. Every reader his book, and every book its reader. And that's what makes this project, soon to be famous, so special, because it's really embodying the enduring values of libraries, but it's setting a course for the future as the world of publishing continues to evolve. I mean, most writers aren't in it for the money. We write because we're compelled to write. We have to get the characters that are in our heads out of them and onto a page. And whether that happens whether they spring full-blown like Athena from the forehead of Zeus, or whether we have to drag them forth like with blood and sweat and tears like any other birth process, it happens. The day I decided to self-publish was the day that I learned that Snooki from the reality TV show The Jersey Shore had a publishing deal. And presumably a ghostwriter. That just killed any illusions that I had about the publishing industry. To paraphrase Stuart Smalley, I thought, it's good enough, it's smart enough, and doggone it, people like it. And like Bluto says at Animal House, don't cost nothing. Because it didn't. Holding that book of mine in my hands was a real thrill. A bigger thrill when the Kirkus Indie reviewed it and called it lyrical. But an even bigger thrill came about 2 months later when I was wallowing in self-absorption and I happened to Google my title of my book. I discovered to my astonishment that it had been added to the collection of a public library in Bangor, Maine. I don't know a single soul in Bangor, Maine. But somehow, someway, some librarian deemed my book shelf-worthy. I checked WorldCat. Other libraries followed. It was amazing. And to be standing here today, though, I think is the biggest thrill of all. I have to say that. Making it to the final 3. I think traditional publishing needs to recognize the power and influence of libraries and the influence of librarians in the reading lives of their patrons. It needs to stop thinking of itself as the gatekeeper, guarding the reading public from the swill of lesser writers. Because as they search for the next Hunger Games or the next Divergent, they're probably overlooking many gems that, with maybe just a little polishing, could find an audience. So when I think of authors and treasures that we may not have read if they were trying to publish today, writers of some difficult books that actually require an investment of time and concentration in our instant gratification world, Melville comes to mind, and Tolstoy, whose query email would have been immediately deleted from the agent's inbox because nobody reads a pitch for a novel with a word count over 100,000, much less 600,000, give or take a few depending on the translation. And I mean Hawthorne, for goodness sake, he wrote a book about adultery without any sex parts. I mean, in 50 Shades of Grey world, would the Scarlet Letter have ever seen the light of day? Probably not. So, to be serious, I just want to say, full many a flower may be born to blush unseen, but I think the library's next mission may be to find those blossoms that deserve to join the bouquet.
How many of you want to read one of these books? So you're going to read them, and you're all going to promise, raise your hand if you're going to promise to write your Amazon review. I'm going to announce the winner, but the last thing I want to leave you with before I do is that this cannot be the end. It must be the beginning. For this process to really work, for us to discover new writers and to bring them to readers, and for the libraries to remain the most trusted institution in America, we have to adapt to the challenge of this next era, which is understanding self-publishing and promoting great books, even books that don't come from 5 publishers. So with that, I will tell you that the next soon-to-be famous Illinois author is Joanne Zien. Think there's a trophy?
Yes, there's
was a very, very close, and everybody had some terrific reviews, and we're going to try to do our best to fulfill the promise that we've worked so hard for you. What we're going to do now, though, is we've got these great, talented people up here, and we've got a great audience here, and so let you guys ask them any questions about their process and how they plan to move forward. Any types of ideas that you have, any concepts are also welcome.
I have a question. So Rick, you're about to be 3 novels in, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and when's the new one coming out?
2 or 3 weeks.
So what's your biggest frustration about marketing a book?
I guess that I've got the reviews. I've got reviews on Amazon, and 99% of them are good.
Yeah.
And that to get it from, and I've sold 500, 600 copies.
Mm-hmm.
To get it from 500, 600 to 5,000.
Right.
When all these people like the book, I've got to get more people to like it.
Right.
Give it to more people, and they're probably going to like it too. So it's getting beyond. It started with my dear friends, and I had 40 people who loved it,
Yeah.
and then it got to we did some marketing on Twitter and Facebook, and it got to 500. How to get to the next thing is the frustration. So, and I've been told that the more books you write, the better you'll do. So, when I called my publisher and said my second book is done, he said, "Why are you talking to me? Start the third." That's all. But it's just frustrating knowing that people like it, and we got to get more people to see it.
It's a little tough.
So,
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, well, I know you're all shy. But anyway, what I'd like to do, I wanted to give you a few moments to take a breath and so ask if you had anything that you'd like to say.
Oh gosh, well.
And then we're going to take
I think
pictures,
I
and that's
said it
easy.
all. No, I just really want to say thank you for all your hard work, because I nominated myself, I'll tell you that, because I didn't hear about this contest until like 2 days before the due date. It was it was January when we were having all those really awful snow days. I read the story in the newspaper. I'm like, okay, I have to get to the Wheaton Library to make sure, which they do have a copy of my book, but would they think to run? I don't know. I had to get there. Luckily, my school district had a snow day, so I got in the car in the 17 below to drive to the library, which was open. And the person who was handling it wasn't there. She was a sick day. And then she was off the next day. And she wasn't going to be back till Friday after everything was already due. So I said, and I could have just left it at that. But I said, no, I'm going to nominate myself. I'm going to do it. And so I did. And it's just been an incredibly validating experience to know that people want to read this and they enjoy reading it, and it means something to them. So I really appreciate it. It means a lot.
I think we have a representative from Wheaton Library here that might want to. Believe me, you're not going to be ignored now.
I'm seeing an author one thought that I would encourage you all, whether you work at libraries or not, to make sure that these books are in your collection. I think that that's a big part of what we did this for too, is to be able to get exposure for our authors in that respect as well.
And we'd also be very happy, the soon-to-be famous team, to help coordinate any author visits at any of your libraries and book discussions and things along that line. And we're certainly going to be encouraging libraries all across Illinois to purchase copies of all the books too. So.
And you might want to check my column on Forbes next week. You might.
So without further ado, thank you very much. We're going to take some pictures with all of our authors at this point. Okay. Denise, you have another?
No, I'm going to go get. Oh, she's here.
Okay. and, have some refreshments, mingle around, and the authors certainly feel free to do that.
We have a question
Oh, I'm
in
sorry.
back.
Do the authors have both to purchase today if we wanted to?
How, Veronica, do we have? No, I know that we were attempting to get that accomplished online, and I don't know what the status exactly is of that right now, but some of you guys bring hard copies?
Yes.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, I think we do
Okay.
have some. And I'm sure they'd be happy to autograph them for you, so.
So we'll set that up right outside this room,
Okay,
okay?
so right outside this room, and then if you want to ask
Why
them.
don't you say signing in like 15 minutes?
Okay, how about 15 minutes, we'll do an author signing if anybody wants to purchase one of the books. We could do something like that.
Yeah, I want to purchase one.
Okay, there you go.
How many copies?
Sales are rising as we speak.
Actually, he has a book for sale also. Called
Any other
Bam.
comments or questions? Well, we really appreciate all of you sticking around for this event. Who knows where the future will take it, and we appreciate, again, all the support from everyone. And once again, finally, congratulations to our soon-to-be famous author. All right, can you guys stand? We'll get a couple of pictures.
Thank you.